Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KINGCOMICS.CA. So today guys, it is Erik Larsen Day. We're taking a look at the Defenders issue number 3, dated May 2001. Get a pretty dynamic up-close shot of Valkyrie here by Erik Larsen. She's the antagonist in this issue, even though usually she's on the side of the good guys and has been a member, of the Defenders in the past. Clearly she's on the opposing side, at least at the beginning of this issue. And also at the end of last issue where she was introduced. So this is almost acting as like, the panel in between the last page of last issue and what's going to be happening inside of this issue here. Some interesting things just color-wise. I like the kind of monochromatic background with just slight adjustments and cooler shadows added to the characters back here. I like how the foreground character Valkyrie is separated from the background characters by lack of detail on these background figures and a lot more lines and hatching and stuff on the foreground figure. And also just these blue metallic elements that they've added in of cool colors versus the hot colors in the back, or the warm colors, which kind of helps separate her from the background even more with her spear as well. Pretty well done there. I like these effects here. These are the kind of things I overuse and abuse myself, and I use the iPad for coloring. But I'm just paying a lot more attention to coloring these days because I've been doing Jacktober and adding color to my iPad illustrations, my Procreate illustrations, and trying to learn some tricks along the way. Also going through these books that I review and applying them to that. I've been doing the Jacktober prompts this month. Maybe you've seen it on the channel. I've been posting the Jack Kirby characters I've been drawing. If you're not familiar with October prompts, basically, someone picks a theme and every day you have to draw a character under that theme. In this case, the theme was Jack Kirby and characters that he created. So I've done this, I think, the last 3 years. I really just am a huge Jack Kirby fanboy and I love all his characters, and most of his characters are fun to draw for one reason or another, right? Because of the varied kind of designs that he did. But yeah, getting ahead of myself, talking a lot about that, but I'll be talking a little bit more maybe about colors overall in my reviews from now till whenever, I guess, I feel I've mastered color, which will probably be never. So, I've always mentioned it in the past. Like I said, I'm just paying a little bit more attention to it these days. And speaking of that, the fact, here's some bad design stuff. They've inserted this Hulk image here. And this is kind of similar to when I add, bigger images and shrink them to add to the images that accompany my videos, right? So the cover of the comic is always there. I have to shrink it down. I find that when you shrink something down, the colors tend to just somehow seem darker or more, kind of congealed together, I guess. They tend to get darker as they do that. So I always feel like you have to go back and adjust and add some brightness to it, right? Just to balance it out a little bit. Feels like someone did not do that here at all. And it just gives us a really kind of messy muck of dark green, black, and yellow spots where, it's kind of even hard to make out that that's the Hulk. And it's not the fault of the artist, in this case, Erik Larsen, because that's a pretty cool Hulk figure once you kind of zoom in and look at it. But it looks horrible because nothing was done to the color adjustment there. All right, that's my spiel about color, at least for now. Actually, I really like just the bold, straight-up colors that they used here for the Rainbow Bridge right off the bat. I do feel like there's more of an old-school Marvel vibe to the coloring with this. It makes sense with Erik Larsen kind of having a bit of that old-school Kirby vibe in his art. And a lot of things helping the colors on this book. One, we are doing computer colors by 2001, right? But we've kind of pulled back on the more kind of garish effects, I guess is how I describe it, or at least some of the crazy image stuff that was going on in the mid-90s. And there's kind of, I feel in this book, a really good balance between the old school Marvel flat colored style and some more modeling here and there with the computer coloring. There's still areas where maybe it doesn't work 100%. Here's, the highlight of just the white on the face here. Maybe you wouldn't have gotten that with old school Marvel, the two kind of tones on her tiara horn thing, whatever that's called, as well. I think that works really well. Where it doesn't work so well is right here where we get kind of modulation, but we can see where, the lightest color goes into the mid tones and there's kind of a line that's created. Now, as you pull back far away, you see less of it, and it's not the end of the world, but it's a little detail that, personally as an artist, I would want to get rid of, and I'd want a much smoother transition there. I forget what this is called. It's layering or staggering or something. Erik Larsen mentioned it at some point about coloring an image early on, doing stuff like that. But it's not so obvious and not used too much, throughout the comic. I guess it maybe is more apparent with rounder surfaces, right? In the case of the boobs here. But so Pluto, we're going back in time to explain a little bit of what's going on last issue and this issue, making a deal with the Ice Queen here. I would say this is Erik Larsen maybe making an effort more so than usual to make his girl that he's drawing here a little bit more appealing, I guess is how I put it. Still has the nipple fetish a little bit though, because I will, you know, first of all, these Valkyrie, you know, boob protectors are kind of, she just armored up her boobs, which is kind of funny when you stop and think about it. And Larsen's nipple fetish, even in the metal, it's been molded there. So yeah, Pluto basically making a deal with the Ice Queen, and that leads to the conflict with Valkyrie. How does it? Well, I don't know if we're going to get into that, but I'll talk more about the art, I guess. So there's parts here. I've talked about the combo of Jansen and Larsen working really well together. I still feel a lot of the Larsen and get little bits of the Jansen kind of line here and there, where usually Jansen, I feel, kind of overtakes the artist that he's inking on. Here there's a really good balance where there's even images where I wouldn't even guess that Jansen, excuse me, had inked it. But then there's other ones where I feel it becomes a little bit more apparent. Here's one. I feel like this face here starts to veer off more into the Jansen kind of world of aesthetics. I've talked about before how, you know, as characters are smaller and further back in the background in some pages, that's maybe where the inker will become a little bit more apparent. But as Jansen usually is really strong in other people and his style kind of takes over, this still feels almost completely like Erik Larsen art. There's just little flourishes like in the inking of these mountains back here that, you know, I could see some of those lines that he's doing in Dark Knight Returns over Frank Miller, right? And that's kind of a typical Jansen line. What a great double page spread. Just to have to draw all this architecture here is such a bitch. And then these, you know, zombie characters coming out of the ground. Larsen, you know, never a slouch. And I've talked about before how I feel he's probably working really fast on this series, but not in any way compromising the storytelling or the compositions. Really still very strong in that quickness in drawing. Gives a lot of energy to the pages too, right? Sometimes when you labor too much over the pages, the characters don't quite look as energetic, and that's not what's going on here. Kind of funny that the characters are, you know, the new defenders are incorporated into this pylon here. Like, I guess, I don't know what the word is, transmogrified or phased into the pylon here. So obviously not happy about it. See, like, here's an example of where Larsen just pulls back and goes really simple and gives us those Kirby kind of angular design elements, the squiggle on the face here, the typical Kirby around the eyes, the mustache. You're not quite sure if it is a mustache or a beard or facial paint or something, you know. Is it a beard or is it Kiss, right? And now in this shot, it's pretty apparent that it's a mustache, right? So he's kind of playing with those same kind of inconsistencies, excuse me, that Kirby, because he was working so fast as well, kind of had in his art, which is fun. I think it's probably doing it a little bit on purpose, right? We've had time, and Larsen's had time to pour over all that Jack Kirby stuff, so it's, you know, we've probably, you know, have it ingrained in our brain almost more than Kirby did himself. You know, for him, it was probably much more on a subconscious level. This is a sequence that I found kind of just interesting because I don't remember typically seeing this in much in mainstream, at least Marvel comics, you know, just kind of a offhand, you know, bystander character getting killed. So he's the old man that was with them up in Canada, right? They're still in Canada from last issue, who they met up with, some kind of old, you know, recluse who lives out in a cabin in the north of Canada. And he's been brought into their whole adventure here. And what we see here is that Pluto just kind of comes up, and it's off camera, so well done, right? Snap obviously indicates that he's broken his neck. But I was surprised to actually see a sequence like that in a fairly mainstream, and I would assume in 2001, fairly kid-friendly comic, right? Not anything that would traumatize you, I don't think, but that's a great shot of Pluto here. Just all the Kirbyisms coming out, I really like. Here's another shot of Valkyrie where she looks a bit more Jansen-ish in the aesthetic and the finishing, right? That rougher kind of line that Jansen has. And then I think most of the rest of this issue is just action, and I love it because Larsen's a master at it, and right away introducing another Valkyrie, right, who's been hanging out with Nighthawk, so there's a bit of confusion there. Obviously they'll be facing off because that's the kind of thing you do with doppelgangers. But just, yeah, Larsen's total mastery of action and foreshortening, well on display here. Them having come off the top of the building, kind of diving right down on them, I think is a pretty cool shot there. Always, you know, with Larsen, this little bits of debris everywhere, kind of helping to layer, make things seem like they're moving. And yeah, the rest of the sequence, man, you know, another great shot here. Look at like just the straight up lines here that Jansen's respecting. Very much a Kirby influence all the way throughout. The extreme force shortening his Silver Surfers, just love it. Talked last issue about kind of going back to the original incarnation of Doctor Strange, where he was, I think, meant to be Asian, and he's got that weird mustache that comes down but also twists up. Like, you know, unfortunately he looks like those old kind of stereotypical drawing of Japanese people and Asian people in like wartime comics. But hey, that's kind of what he looked like in his first appearance, so that's what Larsen's going for. Yeah, so going back to the coloring, again, I talked about earlier on, there's also the fact that this comic, I didn't mention with issue 1 and 2, but it's printed on newsprint. What I call the quality newsprint is kind of what DC was doing, started doing in the late 80s, that held that the color so much better. And again, because they're not going full on crazy computer coloring and, you know, staying kind of more old school and flat in some instances, the various effects they use, lighter colors and stuff for the kind of sonic boom that Hulk creates when he claps his hands together here, right? It almost creates light, right? But it's subtle, it's not garish, and it works really well. And it's kind of, you know, the logical next step to Marvel coloring in the 80s and 90s, rather than just going a little bit too far, like I said, with the image coloring. Some great effects here, the glowy effects, stuff that would be drawn now that they're, you know, the black lines are being turned. This was probably inked in black and then turned into blue line. There's really something kind of again, a happy medium that I really enjoy with the coloring on this book. What a great shot of Silver Surfer here. The characters' parts, just legs and heads and stuff in the foreground. This is very Kirby. Obviously, the head off to the bottom left, he did that a lot. These, like the storytelling, just these clever POV shots that we're getting here. Doctor Strange's hands. A lot of the effect lines and movement lines are very Kirby inspired as well. Like Pluto himself is just basically, you know, I don't know 100% if Kirby created him. Did I talk about this before? I may have. Anyways, he definitely has the Kirby vibe and inspiration. And you know, recently there was a video of Erik Larsen a couple days ago that was on Facebook. He was drawing Venom at some convention, and when you see how that guy holds his pencil or pen in that instance, because he was like pretty much straight to inks, you know, he kind of holds it like this, and you know, he did the top of Venom's head like this, like he's turning a crank or something, and then, you know, for the teeth, he was just kind of doing these little V movements like this, and I was like, man, I know obviously he's been doing it since he was a kid, so there's something to that. I think that you see in his style. It just, you know, it doesn't really matter. I mentioned in the comments, you know, Frazetta, once he had a stroke, started painting with his other hand, his left hand, right? So it's in the head, and if you can just get a little bit of control on whatever appendage you're using as the interface, you know, it doesn't really matter how you hold your pencil. A tendency that we have in the West is to hold our pencil when we draw the way we do when we write, and that kind of hinders the freedom of movement that I feel like Larsen gets by doing that. In Asia, they learn to write and draw with brushes when they're kids, so they already understand that kind of big flowy movement. And, you know, there tends to be a higher percentage of people, in Japan at least, who have a good artistic sense, right? That sounds weird. Is that stereotypical or racist? I don't think so. It's, you know, I'm saying that a specific population has a higher percentage of a skill than others. So what are you going to do? That's just a fact. I can attest to that. I was a teacher for 16 years, and, you know, pretty much all of my Asian students were pretty fairly good at drawing and, you know, doing anatomy and perspective and all that kind of stuff that applies to comic book art or manga, I guess specifically. They always kind of draw in that manga style, right? Or that Eastern style, I guess I'll call it. Love the coloring on this page, all the blues and stuff, just very pleasing and makes the two Valkyries really pop off the page. So it's revealed that basically the Ice Queen had somehow replaced one of the Valkyries and been placed under a spell where she wasn't in control of her own will. And I guess that was due to Pluto double crossing her. So she's not very happy about that, obviously. And the moment comes where she faces off against Pluto. And the other Valkyrie also breaks out of it. So it seems like Pluto now has two Valkyries to contend with. Two mind control Valkyries, previously mind controlled, who now want to attack him. Another of those great shots of just the extreme foreshortening that I love. Like the Hulk here, it's almost like Mad Magazine, right? It's gotten very cartoony. The extreme foreshortening on Namor down here. The Silver Surfer always looks cool in those foreshortened poses. And he throws in kind of a Kirby squiggle here, as well as Kirby kind of parallel movement or action lines, I guess. Just, oh man, again, I just love how Larsen channels that Kirby vibe, but then adds his own stuff and the bit of the cartooniness. Here's another shot where like that definitely feels more like Jansen, right? A faraway shot of the inking compared to the face here. Feels very Larsen. Great double page splash, but is it amazing like some of the ones I've seen in Savage Dragon? Maybe not. Maybe the level of detail is a little bit less. The background, northern Canada, mountains, snow, maybe not quite as evocative. I mean, listen, I'm not shitting on Erik Larsen anyway. Probably took a while to get this down. It's still a great composition. Big elements in the foreground coming towards us, creating that sense of depth. Very beautiful. The coloring on the snow I find just a little weird. You know, it's very gray, so almost feels like, you know, you could confuse it just for regular mountains. So I do feel if you're going to go into northern Canada, one of the reasons to go there is for that contrast of the white snow in the background. Last issue, the snow was pretty white. And end off with the hordes coming out of Hades, right? To attack the defenders, I guess. I really like, again, the blue coloring with the red eyes here and the glowy effects, which I feel now we can probably do a little bit better. Here's another example of that staggered kind of different red tones that creates a line, makes it a little bit weird, but I like kind of the effect here. Feels like a panel from, at least color-wise, from Pitt, right? Somewhere in the mid-range of Pitt's run. A lot of blues and reds there. There you go. We'll continue this storyline on with next week's review, or next Erik Larsen Days review of the Defenders, guys. That is it for today. Thank you so much. If you're still watching, guys, and you're still subscribed to the channel, I really do appreciate all your support, all your comments. I try to answer everybody. If you have a question, shoot it in the comments. Like I said, more than likely, I'll be able to answer you. And any questions I asked during the reviews, I've had some answers come in. Thank you so much, guys, who are doing that. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you, and it really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Once again, check out my comics, Big Baby and STARCRASHER at KingComics.CA. Everyone, again, thanks for watching, and have yourselves an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents STARCRASHER one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like! Subscribe! Like!